What's going on, Nasteey Nation? It's Nasteey, and in today's video I'll be covering everything that you need to know about Rakan's build, runes, and skill order. You guys are constantly asking me for advice with this champion, so I figured it's about time I just clear the air and fill you in on everything that you need to know. Fair warning, this is not going to be a complete champion guide, and rather I'm just going to be focusing in on the best build, runes, and skill order for Rakan. I do, however, already have a champion guide out on my channel dedicated to making you the best Rakan player possible, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. In that video I go over matchups, combos, laning, teamfighting, and many more things. I also go over builds, runes, and skill order in that video as well, but quite honestly it's a little outdated, which is just another reason as to why I decided to make this video. If you do go on to enjoy this one, then be sure to leave a like on the video, but without further ado, let's get into it. Today's video is going to be sponsored and assisted by U.GG. Of course, I have my personal preferences when it comes to what runes I run, what items I build, and what abilities I max up, but sometimes what I think isn't necessarily the most optimal. That's where U.GG comes in handy, because just by typing Rakan into the search bar, I can find out exactly what works best with this champion. I can see the best starting items, the best core build, his win rate, his ban rate, and everything else that you could possibly need to know. I highly recommend that you guys use U.GG yourself by clicking on the link in the description and never lose champion select again. Alright, let's get right into it now, starting with the best build for Rakan, and more specifically the best starting item for Rakan. So for those of you guys who aren't aware, Rakan's kit allows him to be a very flexible champion, and throughout the entirety of this video you'll hear me reference that quite frequently. The reason I mention this is because the runes you take, the items you build, and the abilities that you level up will change according from game to game. And Rakan's starting item is no exception. When it comes to Rakan's starting item, you want to be taking Spell Thief if you are in a matchup that is either a winning matchup or a matchup that you go even in. And if the matchup that you are in is a losing matchup, you want to be taking Coin. When you're in an even or favored matchup, you typically want to play somewhat aggressive during the laning phase as Rakan, and Spell Thief is going to enable you to do just that. It's going to grant some additional damage as well as reward you with gold every time you trade with the enemy, which is exactly what you should aim to do in these kinds of matchups. On the other hand, if you are in a losing matchup, chances are you either won't have the opportunity to trade or simply won't want to trade with the enemy because you'll outright lose the exchange. And that's why in these kind of situations and these matchups you should opt for Coin instead and set your focus on sustaining and collecting the gold that drops from minions rather than trading with your lane opponent. Following the starting item, your next focus should be upgrading that item once and then buying tier 2 boots. You will eventually upgrade your support item up all the way, but that comes a little bit later on in the game. When it comes to buying boots on Rakan, what I would recommend doing is plan on buying mobility boots but settle for merc treads if necessary. In other words, mobility boots is what you would ideally want to purchase, but some games you might just get matched up against a team with a lot of heavy crowd control, and in these situations merc treads are going to be required just so that you can stay alive after engaging in teamfights. The next two items in the build consist of Rakan's core items. It's always a good idea to alter your build to meet the needs of the current game, but your core items are the items that you should build in 100% of your games. The core items for Rakan consist of Zeke's Convergence and Redemption. It's almost as if Zeke's was an item made solely for Rakan, because this item really gives him everything he needs. It gives a combination of armor and magic resist to make him tanky enough to soak up damage following engages. It gives him CDR and allows him to make plays slightly more often. It also gives some extra mana to help him sustain easier without running out. And the Zeke's passive makes his and his allies stronger following an ult and engage. Following Zeke's is when you then want to upgrade your support item up all the way to give you an extra ward and some additional health, and then finish off the core build with Redemption. Redemption has been in the game for a few years now, so I'm sure you all know what it does and what stats it gives, and overall it just suits Rakan very nicely. Now that the core build is over and out of the way, the last two items will vary from game to game. Just a few item examples that may come next include Knight's Vow, Locket, Ardent Censer, and Shirayla's Reverie. If you need more armor, then you can go for Knight's Vow. If you need some more MR, you can build Locket. For more playmaking potential and damage, you can build Shirayla's. And if you want to help your carries do more damage and attack faster, then you can build Ardent Censer. Nothing is really set in stone when it comes to these last two items, so just be sure to evaluate the game that you're in, mix and match these items, and decide which one of them would be most beneficial at the time being. Now that we have covered everything that you need to know about Rakan's build, let's move on and discuss the best rune page to run on Rakan. So I want to start off by first apologizing actually, because a lot of you guys have been asking me for recommendations for runes for Rakan, and for a very long time now I was just flat out wrong, and I was giving you guys not the best rune pages to play with. But I ended up doing some research and found out what the best rune pages actually are, and these are the rune pages that all the pros are running. This one specifically is one that pros are running in over 70% of their games. This page starts in the Resolve tree with Guardian being the keystone. Guardian is a very reliable keystone to take on Rakan, considering it is very easy to proc, given the amount of heals and shields that he has in his kit, and it just overall does a very nice job of aiding his teammates and keeping them alive. Bone Plating comes next, and it's kind of just a given at this point. It's one of the strongest runes in the entire game, and is actually scheduled to be removed or replaced by the start of the next season, but for now Rakan can surely abuse it. Chrysalis comes next in the Resolve tree as a way to help Rakan be a little bit tankier in the early stages of the game, and eventually help him do more damage later on. To wrap up the primary tree, there's Revitalize to increase the heal granted from Rakan's Q, and then we move on to the secondary tree. In the secondary tree, we have Sorcery with Nimbus Cloak and Celerity. Nimbus Cloak is going to give some bonus movement speed after casting your ultimate, which is just very helpful for finding your way into teamfights, and Celerity also gives some more bonus movement speed, as well as some extra damage. The other rune page that pros are running in the other 30% of their games includes the same runes, just a little bit flipped around the other way. This page starts in the Sorcery page with Airy being the keystone, followed by Nimbus Cloak again, Celerity, and Scorch. The secondary tree is going to look a little familiar as well, going into the Resolve tree with Bone Plating and Chrysalis. I don't find this page nearly as effective as the first one I mentioned, but just because a good amount of players are using this page, I still wanted to mention it in the video. I thought for a while that maybe the rune pages could work best in different situations, such as using the Guardian page when on a team comp that lacks a tank, and using the Airy rune page when on a team comp that needs more damage, but after doing some playtesting, I came to the realization that this wasn't really the case at all. No matter what this situation seemed to be, the Guardian rune page always seemed to be the better option by far, and that's most likely the biggest reason as to why it has such a significantly higher play rate. So again, even though both pages tend to work, I would definitely recommend the first page I showed, which was the one with Guardian being the keystone. And finally, the last piece of Rakan that I'm going to cover in this video is his skill order. There are 3 different skill paths that can be successful on Rakan, and for the sake of making this as easy to explain as humanly possible, I'm going to label these 3 skill paths as passive, aggressive, and hyper-aggressive. First up, let's dive into the passive skill order that, although not by much, seems to be the more common choice that pro players and high elo players are taking. This skill path consists of a Q max first, E max second, and W max third, with a point in R whenever possible. I'm personally not a huge fan of this skill order just because it's a little too passive for my liking. It's very peel oriented and has a higher focus on sustaining and mobility rather than playmaking. I could be wrong here, but I think this skill order works a lot better in competitive play in comparison to solo queue, which is why you will see a lot of pro players practicing this skill order in their solo queue games. Again though, I could be completely wrong, who knows, maybe this skill order really is the best option and I'm just too stubborn to give it a chance. Feel free to try it out yourself though and let me know how it feels, because there must be a good reason as to why it's chosen so often. The next skill path that I'll discuss is my personal favorite, and that is the aggressive skill path. This skill path is a little bit more complicated just because it's a little scattered around rather than it being straightforward. Max this ability first, this one second, this one third, and so on. Instead, you're going to start the game by putting 3 points in Q, followed by a W max first, E max second, Q max third, with a point in R whenever possible. By putting 3 points in Q to start the game, you'll have a decent amount of sustain and poke to get you through the lane phase while not committing too much to a passive playstyle. You'll end up getting a late start, but nevertheless maxing W first to be able to have the ability up more often in the later stages of the game to make plays more often. And finally, the last skill path that I'll go over is the hyper aggressive skill path, and this one consists of a W max right off the bat, followed by an E max second and Q max third, with a point in R whenever possible. I call it the hyper-aggressive skill path for a reason, because opting to go this route makes you 100% focused on playmaking, which can be a dangerous task. I don't typically go for this skill path unless I happen to be in a lane that I win harshly, or if my team happens to get really far ahead in the early stages of the game, and I want to try as much as I can to snowball that into a win. Each and every one of these skill paths that I mentioned can be used under the correct circumstances, so feel free to mix and match and see which one suits your playstyle best. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that should just about wrap up the end of this video. I hope you were able to find this video helpful, and if you were, then be sure to let me know down in the comment section below, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also be sure to check out my Twitter, Discord, and coaching info on your way out. Links to all of them will be down in the description. Anyways, that'll do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.